So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Mary Eulig, the Executive Director of the Blood and Tissue Center Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to this Voice of Hope webinar. The Foundation works to raise funds and awareness for the life-saving mission of the BioBridge Global family of nonprofits, which includes the South Texas Blood and Tissue Center. An important part of that mission is meeting the growing need for blood by hospitals and patients across South Texas. If you've ever donated blood, you're probably familiar with what happens on donation day, but you may have wondered what happens after the donation. What does it take to get that blood donation from your arm to our hospitals and to a patient in need? So we're here today to offer you a behind-the-scenes look at what's involved in that process, the journey a blood donation takes to get from donor to patient. We want to hear from you, so if you have questions during the video, please enter them in the chat. Leading us through this behind-the-scenes tour today, we have Adrian Mendoza, Vice President of Blood Services for the South Texas Blood and Tissue Center. And we'll have some additional special guests we'll introduce later on. Adrian?
Thank you, and everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to take you on this journey of what happens when we have your donation and what goes on between that from your arm all the way to the patient's arm whose life you're saving. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and get started with talking about the first step of the journey, which is the donation itself. So we've reached out to you at this point. You've answered an email or a phone call, or you've scheduled your appointment at our web address, or you've called in and made that appointment, and we really are grateful to that. So that's the first step, even prior to this first step in the journey of your donation. But we'll begin here, and it's really an exciting journey. It doesn't take very much time. The donation itself, it may be an hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on what product you're giving. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But even after you give blood, it's a very short journey until the time it actually leaves our facility and goes out to that patient in need. And as Mary mentioned, we're serving over 100 hospitals across 48 counties, a huge, vast area of South Texas, and we're very proud to be able to partner with our hospitals to make sure we're serving the patients in our community. So talking about blood donors, I have the privilege of coming in every day to the donor pavilion here where my office is and getting a chance to literally look out my window and see blood donors coming in. And they come in all shapes and sizes, all ages, and we just love to see them come in. You see the good of humanity when you see a blood donor. And just as an example, I have a few here representative of blood donors. And Ron White, Marcos Perez, and Gerald Perkins are superheroes of blood donors. They collectively have given over 370 gallons of blood. Each of them here on the left side of your screen are shown in an award ceremony where they were all giving, at this point, a commemoration of 120 gallons or more. These guys have been donating since they were young men, and they have continued to do that continuously. And without donors like these gentlemen, we would not be able to serve our community. And without donors like you all and supporters like you all, we would not be able to do what we do. Michael Basudua was also one of our COVID-19 warriors. So he had convalescent plasma he donated after he became infected with COVID-19 and he recovered. He became one of our COVID-19 warriors to help provide plasma to those who needed plasma from recovered donors to help them also fight off COVID and recover from their disease. You're going to see a story here in a few minutes on a video clip of another donor who, like many donors, are actually inspired by being patients themselves. I also am a blood donor, and I'm inspired by, number one, just having seen the impact that blood donation makes in our community, but also personally, my mom received blood transfusions between chemotherapy when she was going through a battle with cancer, ovarian cancer, when I was very young, and she was as well. And without that blood donation and that gift from someone else, she would not have had the opportunity to spend so much time with her family, with me and my sister, my dad, touring all around the country and even abroad. So we really had amazing adventures thanks to the help that she got from blood donors to make her strong enough to have those types of stories to remember with us. So this is a snapshot of our patients that need blood transfusions. And one surprising fact and figure is that really only 2% of those who need blood are in a trauma situation. So those who get into a car accident, maybe they suffer a major workplace injury, they have massive blood loss, maybe they had a gunshot wound and they're losing blood. That really only represents, it's still a large portion, but it's 2% of the blood that's needed is going to trauma victims. Whereas what most people don't realize and are surprised by is that more than half of the blood that's needed goes to patients with cancers, blood disease, and anemia. Whether that's sickle cell anemia or other forms of anemia, and people need continuous blood transfusions to help them stay strong, that is the majority of the patients that we serve. Followed by surgery patients, those who have heart, liver, and kidney disorders, obstetrics and orthopedic patients, and then that 2% trauma and accidents. So that's I think that's helpful to put in context in terms of the need every day. 1 in 3 people experience cancer at some time in their life, and most likely if they have a hospital stay with cancer and they're going through chemotherapy or they're going back and forth to get some treatment, they're going to need supportive therapies using blood components through that time that they're fighting to help them stay strong, help them fight, and make sure that they can stay healthy. So there's thousands of people in our community every day who are going through that personal battle, and they need blood to help support them. So I want to start off in our journey and give a chance for you guys to see up close and personally one of our donors. We're very grateful to Laura, and she has a personal story she's going to talk about here, and also talk with one of our team members, Rudy, from our fixed sites, our donor centers. He's going to talk about the donation experience. So I'll turn it over to let that video play for you guys, and then I'll be back with you in a minute.
I think it's very easy to assume that we're indestructible. My family and I were traveling some back roads in rural South Georgia where we lived, and unfortunately another vehicle struck the vehicle that we were in. My mother was killed upon impact. My father was severely injured, and I was severely injured because of the severe blood loss, primarily from my left arm being cut to such an extent that they were considering amputating it. I received a blood transfusion to save my life and to save my arm as well. The last thing you're thinking is that on a sunny Sunday afternoon, your whole life is going to change dramatically and forever. You may need a blood transfusion or some sort of life-saving operation or procedure. And in my case, because my injuries were so severe due to the blood loss, other issues, I needed a blood transfusion, and thankfully I received one.
Hey guys, my name is Rudy Flores. I'm at the South Texas Blood and Tissue Donor Pavilion. We have 7 sites, and if you come down to donate, it takes about an hour. If you do it on our donor dock, you can do it a little faster. You can even do it at home. You can do it on your cell phone, or you can do it on the computer the day of your donation. Then you're going to come in and get screened and do a wellness check. We're going to make sure all those questions that you answered are done and complete, and that they're eligible for you to come through and donate. And then come on down and we'll get you going.
I'm Laura. I donate blood regularly because I know the importance of blood donation after I was in a car accident. My donation today will help people with severe anemia, cancer, kidney disease, and will go on to save 3 lives.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm back with you guys, and we're going to see a couple more video clips throughout our journey today. That's just to give you a snapshot of the donation experience. To serve our donors throughout our community here, we actually have 5 donor centers in the San Antonio metro area, and those are shown here on a map. We also have a New Braunfels donor center up further north, and Victoria, Texas, we have a donor center there that also supports the hospitals. In that area, we supply and have a depot in that location to support the hospitals in Victoria, Texas. Coming soon, we're really, really excited about both our Bernie and our Bulverde Spring Branch locations, which will be opening up for Bernie at the end of this year, possibly early in the beginning of 2022. And then also shortly afterwards, their Spring Branch location will be opening up. And we're really excited about both of those donor centers. We're really trying to create an atmosphere that has a sense of place for those communities to really have a place where donors can be proud of as part of their community, a place to give. So we're very excited about that coming up. I want to talk about other ways besides donor centers, which is our main campus type facility where donors can come in, and just like you saw from Rudy, he manages all those fixed donor centers where we have a brick and mortar facility for people to come in, and that's always here during the day to come in and make an appointment at. We also host a number of blood drives with partners in our community, whether it's an employee blood drive or an event such as at a school or a community park. We have the capacity to go out not only with a blood mobile like you see here, and that's been in place. We have a vintage photograph right there. I just love to see with one of our old blood mobiles as we started out in the 1970s. And we still have those blood mobiles going out throughout Texas, South Texas every day, and in Victoria. But we also have the ability to take the blood center, sort of a donor room, and create a donor room inside of a facility, whether it's the YMCA, a high school auditorium, your employee lounge. We can make that event happen throughout a variety of circumstances, and we can fit the size and scale to make it work. We've even done blood drives inside the AT&T Center, massive events where we can host hundreds of donors at a time. So we have a lot of scale there, and we're really excited that we have the capability to be as mobile as possible and take blood drive and donation to you. So the next step in the journey is really to go from the blood drive to the blood that you've donated to the processing center. Our facility here, located where I work, is off of I-10 and 410. We have a large campus here where we have all the testing laboratory functions as well as processing right here in this facility. So it doesn't have to go far to get processed. And one of my favorite shows, I'm a nerd in terms of looking at, I love to see manufacturing processes and things like that. And one of my favorite TV shows is How It's Made, and you can see how different widgets and gadgets are made and how they're crafted. We have the same kind of operation here with, and if anyone wants a really deep dive into the process, they're more than welcome to go on one of our tours where they can get that in-depth review of how that process looks. But we're going to highlight a few of the things. Here you see on the bottom right picture, there's a picture of a coolers. We have different color-coded coolers to describe how those products need to be processed depending on the needs in the hospitals. So they come into our facility in the coolers from the blood drive. And at that point, we can separate those different products into different components. And I'm going to let Julian from our component laboratory in this video talk through that a little bit, and then I'll pick it up on the other side again and describe a little bit more about that process.
My name is Julian Salcido, the component supervisor. Thank you for stopping in our lab. Today we're going to demonstrate the different types of actual blood products that we make from your donation. One of those blood products is our FRBC, which is a filtered red blood cell. Our second product is a fresh frozen plasma. Our third product is a recovered plasma. In addition to these donations, we also receive convalescent plasma, which is our CCC plasma. We have different platforms in which we manufacture these types of products. One of our platforms is our Plasma Specialist platform, in which we have high volume of recovered plasma. Red blood cells carry oxygen through the body for patients with anemia or major blood loss. Platelets are cells that help stop bleeding after trauma or surgery. And plasma is the liquid that carries cells through the bloodstream and is used for shock and trauma patients.
All right. So talking a little bit more about those different components, Julian mentioned FFP, which is fresh frozen plasma. He mentioned red cells, talked about platelets too, but I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper here just so you guys can see a visual of this a little bit closer. When you look at a sample of blood, we actually can spin that blood down in a centrifuge so that it can separate out the different layers. And this sample tube represents those different layers. And the largest proportion, about 55% of what is in your blood coming out of your vein, is plasma. Plasma does carry nutrients and antibodies, which are the signals your body needs to be able to make communication between different cells. And your body needs plasma as often one of the products that's given to trauma patients to help replenish their fluid volume and make sure their heart's pumping successfully. The other components or fractions include what's called a buffy coat, and that's a small thin line that goes between the plasma and the red cells. And that buffy coat contains a number of things, but leukocytes, which are immune cells or white cells, as well as platelets, are actually in that buffy coat. So you can see how few platelets there actually are when you consider that that's a combination. That little thin white line is a combination of both the white cells and platelets. So there's not that many platelets that are circulating in your body, and we have special instruments to actually collect that in the donation center and separate that platelet part out of the blood donation, so that those who are giving platelets only, this is the only section we're actually taking of their blood, and then we're providing them back their plasma and red cells. Same thing, we can do the same kind of thing to separate out just plasma at donation and separate out red cells only at donation. But we can also do all of this manufacturing inside of our facility here. So the red cells, which are also called erythrocytes, are about 45% of the total blood volume you have in that sample. So red cells carry oxygen throughout your body. They're the ones that have the hemoglobin inside your red cell. That helps to carry, it goes through your lungs, deposits carbon dioxide back into your lungs, picks up oxygen, and helps carry that oxygen throughout your body to keep your tissues and your blood healthy. When it comes to platelets, that's helping your blood clot. So if you suffer an injury, those platelets are going to find their way to your injury, and they're going to start creating a bridge to prevent more blood loss and also internal injuries that happen. Platelets are useful there. Many times people take medication that actually reduces their platelet count when they're going through different diseases or they're fighting different diseases. So often that is where platelets come in handy. We need to replenish that platelet, and platelets are used a lot in cancer therapies. So cryoprecipitate, which is a part of the plasma, also helps to provide clotting factors to the injury, and so that's used also during surgical recovery and surgery. I'm going to go on to talk about the next step, which is actually, if you think about it, happening simultaneously to processing. So when you saw those coolers come in from the blood drive to our facility, we also send sample tubes to our testing laboratory, which is just next to our processing laboratory. So while the blood components are being processed and separated out into those different sections, we're taking that sample tube and we're sending it along through all the different infectious disease testing that we have to carry out. And that's not only done so that we can make sure that patients are safe, but we're also checking to make sure that there's nothing that we need to let you guys know about if you're a donor. So I'm going to have another video here to pop up in a few minutes to talk about that testing process. But you think about in terms of that testing being really important to the safety of the blood to the recipient. And also, it's not just testing we're relying on, but we also ask a lot of questions when donors come in to donate blood, making sure that not only they're healthy to give and it's safe for them to give blood, but also that they don't have any risk factors. They might have traveled to an area with an endemic disease going on. We ask questions about travel because of that. We ask questions about medication to make sure not only are they taking medication that won't make it unsafe for them to donate, but also they're not taking medication that might be unsafe for the recipient to receive blood from. So that's the reason we ask a lot of the questions when donors come in to donate. But then we also take that sample tube as an additional assurance. We're sending it through a battery of tests to check for HIV, hepatitis C, hepatitis B, and other diseases so that we can make sure that that is safe to give. And we also check for certain infectious diseases that are more dangerous for a pediatric patient to receive. Those in the adult population, we're often exposed to things throughout our lives, and it's not dangerous for us to necessarily have exposure to someone else's blood who's an adult, but it might be dangerous for an infant to receive blood from an adult. So We do special testing to make sure that those patients who are pediatric or infants, newborns, have blood that's safe for them as well. That's all happening in our facility. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott, who is going to talk about the testing capabilities at our site.
My name is Scott Jones. I'm Vice President of Scientific Affairs here at BioBridge Global, and we are standing right now in the production testing laboratory here at Qualtex Laboratories. So samples arrived, we check the samples to make sure they're okay, and then we put them on our track system here. They go through, they get spun real fast, they get decapped, and then they go for infectious disease testing, where we test for different infectious disease such as HIV, hepatitis C virus, Zika virus, and West Nile virus. And then once we are done with that testing, we also perform additional testing such as determining the blood type and other sort of chemistry testing. And once all testing is done, it goes into our computer system. So for whole blood, we receive the samples during the day and late evening, and we get the testing done in 10 to 12 hours.
Perfect. So we have reached at this point, because processing and testing are all complete in the journey. Now we're reaching the final stage, which is the exciting stage of distribution. So this is a part near and dear to me. I started out in what's called hospital services, which you're going to get to see a video of one of our hospital services techs, Erica, talking about the distribution process. But that's where I began. My career in blood banking was working to distribute and take those calls from hospitals, picking up the phone and hearing about the patient's needs, making sure we packed up that blood product that was given by the donors to make sure it got to where it's intended to that patient who needs the blood. So we have 24/7, we're operating our processing, our testing laboratory, and distribution. So we are running around the clock, taking the blood that's given during the day and in the evening, and we're turning that into product that can be ready to go out and to be distributed as soon as possible. Typically 24 hours is about the time it takes for us to get all the test results back, for us to review our paperwork, the questions from the donors, get everything ready, labeled, and released, ready to go to the hospitals. And that's when those hospital orders come in at all hours of the day and night, and we're ready with a fleet of people to take them where they need to go across 48 counties and 100 hospitals. So rain, sleet, or shine, we're here to help make sure that that's given to where it needs to go. And just a reminder about the patients, we could get a call at any hour of the day, but hospitals do stock blood for these types of treatments we talked about earlier in the pie graph. But just as a reminder, more than half, cancer and blood diseases, anemia, those are the things that they kind of predict and know what's going to happen. So they stock inventory of blood routinely for that. From us, surgery patients, they usually know in advance they're going to have a surgery, so they call in and place that order for us. And other people who are going through treatments for heart, liver, and kidney. And orthopedic patients, they know when they're going to have a surgery, unless someone's come in after an accident and they know they need to have a surgery right away. And then in that case, they may call in a stat order, just like they would call stat supplies for a surgery in a hospital. And obstetrics patients, so if someone comes in late at night with a delivery and they might have blood loss that's exceeding what they would want to see, they then call us and they can order that stat for us to get that product delivered to them right away. And trauma and accidents as well. One thing I think I want to note too, going back to the testing, is that we also perform compatibility and cross-matching. So oftentimes the patients who are needing blood product, they might have a rare antigen, and we want to make sure that the blood that they're receiving matches, and that doesn't create a problem for them where they might have a severe reaction to a transfusion. So if the patient's known to have a rare type of blood, we can actually narrow down the type of blood beyond what you would normally think about. Type A, type B, type O, and RH. That's the normal blood types you and I always think about. There's also a whole range of other blood types within those categories, and we can narrow down the test and make sure that that blood product that patient, that specific patient's intended to get, is going to be compatible with them. So that's one of our transfusion services we offer. So the last video I want to share with you guys is of Erica in hospital services and Belinda Flores, who works with our hospital partners really closely to make sure that we're meeting the needs in our community. So I'll turn it over to them for our last video, and then we have some exciting things coming up too, so stick around.
Hi, I'm Belinda Flores, and welcome to Hospital Services. Here in Hospital Services is where we receive orders daily, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from all the hospitals that we service. What's important to note is daily we are having conversations with hospitals to discuss what their inventory is, what they've ordered, and what we're able to fill for their transfusions. The South Texas Blood and Tissue Center services over 100 hospitals in 48 counties.
My name is Erica Rubalcaba. I work for Hospital Services. After 24 hours of your donation, it comes down to be stored. And then after all that is processed, we wait for hospitals to put their orders in, and we get ready to be shipped out when orders come in to get fulfilled. Red blood cells last 42 days, platelets last 5 days, and frozen plasma lasts 1 year. Blood is packed in temperature-controlled containers for transport. After some checks, the blood is ready to be transfused.
All right, so now we've reached that the next final step in this exciting journey from one heart to another, which is in transfusion. And with that, I'd like to turn it over back to Mary Eulig to introduce a special guest and a live event we have. So I'll turn it over to you, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. So if any of you donated blood at our donor pavilion, you may have noticed in several areas some handwritten thank you notes that were posted. Thank you for thanking blood donors for their life-saving gift. These notes are from a regular blood donor, Annette Hennessy, who gives blood and leaves the thank you notes to pay it forward for her daughter, Naomi. Naomi has a very special story that Annette will share with us today, as they are live in the hospital where Naomi is receiving a blood transfusion. Annette, can you share Naomi's story with us and let us know how things are going today?
So this is Naomi, and she's actually getting a transfusion today. So she's going to tell you her own story.
Okay, so my story is the type of blood disorder is called thalassemia, and it's like really common for Asian people, and so yeah, and then I got diagnosed with this when I was 6 years old, and then by now I'm 19, so and then so I've been diagnosed with this for a while. This type of blood disorder is that I go to the doctor every 3 weeks, get my blood count checked, and sometimes it's lower, a little lower than usual, and then this week is pretty low, so I need to get 3 units. So when I get this my second unit, and I don't know if you can see, so right there. So and then. So I get checked on Monday, and then because of my blood type, it's hard to find a match. So I do not come back on Tuesday. Instead, I come back on Wednesday and get my transfusion. So, and then the type of blood I have right now is type B positive, and that's or O positive. So yes. And there's every year before COVID started, I go to Oakland, California to see some doctors there, and they were now they're studying more about thalassemia and how to find a cure for it. So, and when as COVID hit, so we kind of had to do it on Zoom, but also other family from China that adopted. And I know two of my friends who adopted have the same symptom as I have. So,
So I want to add one part of her story. So we adopted her when she was 10, and you can't even tell her. She is the most bubbly, happy, wonderful, amazing girl you'll ever meet. Having this blood disorder is not a limiting factor in her life at all. She is she's gone to college. She is serving a full-time mission for our faith. She is very active in everything she does, and this smile is 24 hours a day with her. She's incredible. But when we were adopting her, the director of the orphanage came up to me and spoke to me privately and asked why I wanted to adopt this 10-year-old girl, because she was going to be dead by the time she was 14. Because in China, they have such a severe blood shortage that she only got a few units of blood each year. And now she's getting 3 units today alone, and she'll get more in 3 weeks. But so she has lived well past age 14. It's certainly not slowing her down now. And with the quality matching that we're able to get for her blood and the frequency of her transfusions, she is expected to have a normal life expectancy here. But she does have, we do have challenges with matching her. By the end of this year, beginning of next year, she will get her 300th unit of blood. And because she's been exposed to so many donors, she does have a lot of antibodies that have built up in her blood, like were discussed earlier. And they're given really weird names, like some of them are capital E and some of them are little e, and they're totally different. And it makes no sense to me or anybody without some very specialized degree. But because she's so specific on which donors she can have, there are times that we have not been able to get her a donor locally that matches her, and her blood has had to be flown in from other states. So the nurse just came in to check her, so I'm going to give her a little bit of privacy for just a minute. So she does have to have that very specialized blood. And because, like y'all said earlier, red blood cells only last 42 days. So if she gets a unit of blood that's been sitting on the shelf for 35 days, it's still only got 7 days of life in it. So by the time she goes back to the doctor, she's going to be significantly lower than if she had gotten really fresh blood. So she needs to have quality donors that are donating regularly so that she can always get the blood that she needs when she needs it. And I'm just so grateful for everything South Texas Blood and Tissue has done to keep my daughter healthy and to help her to live up to her full potential and to meet all of her dreams. So thank you.
Ned and Naomi, that's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I just wanted to ask, so that we're all clear, how many times has Naomi had transfusions this year? I know it's been a number of them. And do you see a difference in how she feels after she gets a blood transfusion? Or Naomi, you tell us.
So she gets blood every 3 weeks. Regardless of where her counts are, she needs at least 1 unit every 3 weeks. So that'll be about 17 times a year, unless she gets sick. If she gets any sort of an illness, her counts will drop pretty quickly, and she will need blood earlier. So that ends up being about 40 units of blood each year right now. And that can change at different stages in her life and go up or down a little bit. But it's pretty much long term. And when her blood counts drop, her mood goes down. She sleeps more. This morning as we were walking into the hospital, I commented that she's a walking off place, but she's my big, happy, perky girl, and I was passing her in the hallway. So it was pretty obvious that her counts were pretty low today.
So
Naomi,
grateful to all the blood donors who made it possible for Naomi to get those donations. Adrian, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's so good to meet you guys. Naomi, you're such a warrior. So thank you for being an advocate for donors, as well as being able to be here today to talk about your experience and how it's helping you. We're just so proud of being able to serve people like you. I mean, you're making a lot of a difference in the world, being who you are. So we're just really excited about you. Thank you so much, Naomi. Antoinette, your mom.
Adrian, I wonder if you could share a little bit. Annette mentioned how the donations that go to Naomi receive special testing. And of course, that relates back to what we heard from Dr. Scott Jones a little earlier in our Qualtex laboratories, who provide a variety of types of testing services for people. But there are also other types of donations that are specialized that can go to special patients in need. You know, we've heard of people who say they donate for premature babies. There are other special donations. And can you tell us a little bit about that and what's involved?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yeah, so we, as I mentioned, and with Naomi, in her case, it sounds like she gets cross-matched and compatible units that are tested for special antigens. And those antigens are essentially markers on the cell surface. And if someone receives the markers on the cell surface that their body does not recognize, it can cause their body to react very negatively and create a transfusion reaction. Those transfusion reactions can be very severe. So given that Naomi's had a lot of different blood transfusions, she's probably, as Annette said, her mom, that creates a lot of those cell surface markers that she might have that need to make sure that we also have the right key, essentially, so that there's no incompatibility between the donors' units she's receiving and those that were given. So we have special tests that we can run, a battery of tests to make sure that we're narrowing down the specific donations that are compatible to her. And once we identify those donors who also have the right biomarkers, we can actually ask them to come in and make sure that they're giving regularly, and we flag those units to be separated out, and we dedicate them so that they're available when Naomi needs them. So we can do that with all of our different hospitals. There's a number of patients in the same situation where they need to have specially cross-matched and compatible units. This also happens when, let's say, a woman who's pregnant, carrying an infant, needs to make sure that if she needs a transfusion either during surgery or maybe she's going to have a planned C-section and there might be some blood loss there, they want to make sure that that unit of blood that she's receiving not only won't have any reaction to the mom, but also the baby she's carrying. So that's another case where we do special testing. When it comes to pediatric or infant babies receiving blood, we'd also check commonly for what's called cytomegalovirus, which is an acronym. We love acronyms in our world. It's CMV, but cytomegalovirus is something that's common in the adult population. It doesn't hurt you if you are receiving a transfusion as an adult normally, but we do know that it can cause transfusion reactions in infants and newborns and in pediatric patients. So we screen a lot of our units, about 1/3 of those units that are O positive or O negative for cytomegalovirus, to make sure that we can label them as negative if they don't have cytomegalovirus, and those units are typically selected for those pediatric patients. We can go into a lot more detail. I'm probably not the best expert on these different test methods, but certainly we could create another WebEx for it, I'm sure, but it's very interesting stuff.
That's great, thank you. You know, I see that Adriana has posted a comment that if anyone has a question, please submit it here in the Q&A box in the chat section of your screen, and that when you do that, you'll be entered for a chance to win a gift card after the event, and she'll send that to you after our webinar. I do see a question here, Adrian. I don't know if you can see this. Are you starting to see an increase in the number of donors compared to the prior 18 months, after the pandemic, or as we're still in it, as people return to a more normal daily life?
Well, we've seen a couple signs of optimism and improvement in the last couple of weeks. It hasn't been real steady, but there have been some moments where we've seen a nice influx of donors coming in. Notably, about 3 weeks ago, we actually had a number of high school blood drives kicking back off again, and thank goodness, because we really rely on high schools, universities, and colleges to help us bring in new donors and who hopefully become lifelong donors with us. And also with COVID, we really didn't have high schools, universities, and colleges in session. So those drives were very difficult for us to have, not impossible. So having them back in the schedule has been a huge relief. However, we are still very much struggling day to day to meet the demands of the community. There is an increase in blood use nationally. It's not just limited to San Antonio and South Texas, but an increase overall of about 10% more blood is being used throughout the nation. And daily we get requests from other blood centers around the country. Often we cannot help them, but they are also experiencing severe shortages. Like us, we also ask, like them, we also ask for help from our neighbors if maybe they have some product, blood product that they can help us out with for the hospitals. But that said, today, sadly, we do have less than a 1-day supply again of type O red blood cells, particularly type O positive. We had just half a day of supply this morning, and we started raising a lot of red flags with our partners in corporate communications with Mary's team, as well as with letting know our hospitals that we're going to have to start triaging, or we have been triaging, meaning we have to prioritize what product goes where. That is always very difficult for us to do. So, I wish I could say we're out of the most challenging times, but we're not. We need to have the community really help rally, let people know about the importance of blood donation, do a grassroots blood drive, whatever we can do to kind of overcome this and get back and build back at least a 3-day supply, if not a week, is what we really want to have on hand.
Yeah, that is a challenge. And, we were talking earlier that the latest census numbers showed 300,000 new residents in Bexar County, and there have been announcements just in the last few months of 3 or 4 major new hospitals in Bexar County. So that all adds to the need, that demand you're talking about, Adrian. And another question related that's come in is if we have a frozen red cell supply in San Antonio, and if that's seen as a viable backup for low supply issues.
Good question. Frozen red cells are an interesting scenario because we have had at times when we've had a surplus in red cells that are not needed in our hospitals. We've had maybe more than 3 days, hopefully, if not more than 7 days. We can trigger on freezing of red cells. Red cells to be used in a massive, trauma or disaster situation. One thing about the frozen red cells is they have to be what's called declisseralized, meaning that they have to be thawed out in a very specialized way, and it takes some time to do that. So they can't be taken off the shelf like other blood products and sent literally immediately to the hospital stat. They have to be processed before that, and it does take time. And it's also not without, some risk in terms of losing some of the product, the red cell product. So it's not something we want to rely on. We really need to have donors come in frequently enough and routinely enough that we can keep a fresh inventory of blood available for any emergency on hand. But when we do have surpluses of blood, we can preserve them at 4 times, which are more lean like now, by freezing them.
Thank you. That's interesting to hear. Can you also share, Naomi mentioned that her blood type is B positive. So that's what they're looking for when they have a need for a donation. but she also mentioned being able to receive type O blood. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of O negative, O positive, just how available it is in the general blood supply and the need for it, and some new things that we're doing with whole blood to make that available to patients?
Sure. So, most people do kind of know the common rule of O negative blood is a universal donor type. And that is true for red cells. What's interesting is that type AB donors, which are actually the rarest blood type, are universal donors for platelets and plasma. So when we look back at that slide showing the different fractions of the blood, you saw that yellow portion and that white line. Those portions of the blood, the donors who are at type AB are actually universal donors for the recipients of plasma or platelets. So, but that said, type O is commonly used in transfusion when someone's blood type is not known or they're not sure yet, or if the blood product type that they need, if it's a B positive or an AB positive, is not available because of the rarity of that blood type, they'll rely on type O. Right now, our hospitals use about 60% type O red cells. However, our population has about 38% type O donors. So doing the math, you can see why the challenge of maintaining type O inventory is such a difficult one. And we're always putting a call out to type O donors as a result. However, every donor type O, A, B, AB, they're all very important. We use the different blood type donors for different types of procedures. So we'll ask type O donor to donate red cells typically because it's a universal red cell donor. And we'll ask a person who's type AB or B or A, like myself, to typically donate platelets or plasma to help those in need. So that's kind of a breakdown there. Now, in terms of whole blood, your other question, Mary, was about some other things we're doing to make blood available to those who might need a universal transfusion immediately. We were one of the first, actually the first civilian blood bank outside of the military to create a program along with our community emergency medicine partners to provide what's called low titer O whole blood on those hospital, pre-hospital air units, so air ambulances and also ground ambulances. And we actually work with partners throughout San Antonio and South Texas to supply whole blood that's been specially screened for various human leukocyte antigen markers. Like we talked about, the special markers in the blood that we check for. These have been checked to make sure that they're essentially universal, free of markers that could create a transfusion reaction. And those whole blood units are supplied on the helicopters and in ambulances, so that if someone receives, someone gets into a major accident, most likely at this point, there's blood actually on the helicopter that they get airlifted on, or in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, so that they're getting whole blood, meaning it hasn't had any of those products separated out. It still has the plasma, it still has the platelets, it still has red cells. It's just one whole blood, literally like what was taken from the arm, just tested, and we've qualified the donor, and then it's provided out there so that they're getting that what they're essentially losing in a traumatic injury right back in from a donor who's been specially screened to be a universal donor for them. So that's it.
That's great news. And I think that helps answer another question that's come in, asking what happens if blood and tissue and other partners don't have the right blood type available for the current need. So that the work that's being done there to broaden the use of various universal types to make that blood available. And also, Adrian, I think you'd note that our hospital services staff, it's almost like an air traffic control system, moving available blood around to meet the need as it waxes and wanes in different areas.
That's right. We do spend a lot of time helping the hospitals know what inventory they have that might need to be returned and recycled back so that it's available to other hospitals. We work really closely with all of our hospitals in the region to make sure that we're making we're letting no product expire, and that people have what they need. And throughout the network of hospitals, we've got the ability to transfer and move those blood products around.
Another question that's come in, kind of a different topic, is do most first-time donors become regular blood donors? And I would expect many are very nervous to give. How are we able to get them to come on a regular basis?
That's a great question, and that is the essential mystery we have to solve it work together on. So normally, and this is a current stats that we just kind of ran recently, about 21% of our donors who come in one time will come back again within 12 months. That's not all of them. That means that still there's, about 80% of the donors that are not coming back for a second time within 12 months. I think one of the things that we can do to try to retain those donors and make sure that they come back is to help them be more aware of the essential need that their donation has, just for the current demand, but also because this is a perishable blood product that we need them to come back routinely. If we had just, I think it's 10% of those donors could come back more often and donate one more time in the year, we would actually not be in a blood shortage. So the key is delivering a delighting experience. We're trying to make the experience as fast, painless, effortless as possible. We want more people to be aware of why they're needed to come back again. And hopefully they have the greatest of care and attention. And we thank them for that donation when they're here and make sure that they feel valued. But that is the key, is making sure they know and making sure that they're cared for the right way. So we are spending a lot of time making sure we can deliver a great experience for our donors. And we welcome any feedback that might help us make sure that experience is even better.
That's great, Adrienne. One last question here. If you can't give blood, how can you help?
That's a great question. So I'll take part of that, Mary, and then you can add on things that I might miss. But we always need help for financial contributions. As a blood center, we operate on very slim margins to try to make sure we keep the cost of healthcare low. We are a not-for-profit organization, and we often need help to replenish our very expensive instruments, our buses, our fleets, our facilities need continuous maintenance. It's very expensive to run a blood center, to do the outreach to donors, to get out there and communicate to donors. And we really cannot support that on our own with the price we provide the blood to at hospitals, because we do it such that it just really covers our costs. So anything we can have help with financial contributions is certainly supported. Spreading the word is another area. We only have a team of about 12 that kind of go out there and really reach out to donors and talk to them and speak with chairpersons and sponsors and hosts to try to encourage donations from our donor recruitment teams. And we need continuous help there. So if an army of folks would be willing to help us share the message on social media, tell their neighbors, tell their friends, tell their families about the importance of blood donation, that could help us reach those who might not know that they're needed so desperately. Any other comments, Mary?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Adrienne. And more information about blood donation, about the need for blood, about the different types of donations that you can make based on your blood type. When you come in to donate, you can have, if you don't know your blood type, our technicians can do typing right then to tell you what your type is and talk about the type of donation that you can make based on that blood type that will have the most impact for patients. So there's more information at southtexasblood.org on those topics. And as Adrienne said, sharing the word on social media today is a major way that word is spread about the need for blood and the impact that you can have. So you can find us if you search South Texas Blood and Tissue Center on social accounts, or search for Connect for Life, and please just help spread the word. That's a major focus for our foundation and for our organization. So I think that wraps things up today. I'd like to definitely thank Adrian, thank Annette and Naomi for sharing their amazing story. And you saw some of the videos. Laura, who has been an amazing supporter and shared her story on video. Of course, she continues to encourage others. We'd also like to thank our foundation outreach committee. We'd like to thank the staff here who participated in the videos and everyone who worked behind the scenes, especially Adriana Estrada, who's worked to make this webinar possible. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and we would really encourage you to share our life-saving mission by forwarding the recorded version of it that will be emailed to you. Adriana will share that with everyone who registered today, and also some of our Q&A information, other ways you can get involved. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll keep you posted about other webinars we have scheduled, and we're also very open to ideas. Hope that you would share those if there's something you'd like to know more about. Thank you again, Adrian. Thank you all for being with us today.